Welcome back to Davin's Random, and I'm Davin, and today I've got a new project. So behind me is the Porsche 928. Just to give you guys an update on this, there's still a bunch of work I have to do to it, but it does run and drive. I got to do the torque converter bearings on it, which is not going to be a joy, and I'll probably rebuild the automatic transmission valve body in this. And then the timing belt I still have to do, change out the water pump, kind of flush out the cooling system. So that's going to be happening on this. Oh, and rebuilding the brakes completely, but leaving them stock. So I'll take you guys through that, replacing the lines, just getting rid of all the old rubber. They don't really need to be done, but they need to be done to make it safe. But anyway, let me show you the new project, the big unveil. So let me go ahead and just unwrap this thing. This is a 1997 BMW Z3 Roadster, and it's the 2.8 liter version. I've had two Z3s. My first one was a Z3 Coupe 3 liter that I put a lot of money and energy into to make it a track car. This one, this is just a cool little car, but I'm going to use the same upgrade map that I did on my old Z3 Coupe. And let's talk about what the upgrade map's going to be, but first let me show you what the engine looks like. So this has 54,000 original miles on it, which is not much of anything. And it has that great 80s or 90s car alarm sound. And really it's in pretty mint condition. I did have to do a little bit of work just to get it running. It needed a new fuel pump, and I had to rebuild the power windows and the doors because they were really slow. And there's still a few minor things that need to be fixed on it that I'll take you through. But here is the engine. So this is the infamous 2.8 liter BMW engine. A lot of people may be asking, why didn't you just, why did you bother with this car, and why didn't you just get the M? Well, in reality, this car is so much more reliable than the M, and you can get the horsepower really close to it. So years ago when I had my Z3 Coupe, there was another guy that had a Roadster like this, and we kind of did some stuff to it, and I want to repeat what we did back then on his car to this, plus a little bit more. So the road to upgrades are going to start with the intake manifold, and that's the first thing I want to do. And so the intake manifolds that you want to use on these, I think, are from like 1992 to 1995 BMW 2.5 liter intake manifolds, and they just have bigger rails going through here. There's a few things that you need to do to it, like you need an adapter plate to put this on. There's some plumbing that you have to do underneath with vacuum lines, but other than that, it pretty much bolts straight up, and it just allows it to breathe a lot more. The other reason why I like the 2.8s is because this is the single Vanos. So basically it means that there's just electronic timing adjustment on the intake valves, not the exhaust. So that means in the intake itself, it's missing the DISA valve, and you also don't have the other Vanos sensor, which is really hard to replace. Now, I've done those a couple of times on my other Z3, and that was not fun. And that was really my only major complaint to the reliability of this car. The only other thing that I think is a major problem on here would be the water pump. And these water pumps had two problems. One, the impellers were plastic from the factory, and this, only having 54,000 miles on it, probably still has the factory pump in it. So that's definitely coming out and getting changed. Now, these don't have timing belts, they have timing chains, so I don't have to worry about that. But the other thing about the water pump too is these had kind of substandard bearings, and on my Z3 Coupe, the bearing actually went out and the fan fell into the radiator and tore it up so bad it actually tore up the AC condenser too. Now I'm sure you guys are wondering what 2.8 this is. Now In the US, most of the 2.8 liters that came over here didn't have Nicocil. And if you're familiar with what Nicosil was, it was problematic back in the day because gasoline had a lot of high sulfur. And so BMW created these all aluminum blocks that had a Nicosil coating, and basically the sulfur would eat the coating and then it would just be aluminum, and then that would wear out really quick. So it was kind of a bad thing. I avoided the 2.8s because of that back in the day. I didn't realize that the 2.8s that came to the US didn't have that problem. Now, the other thing about the 2.8s in the Z3s is these are aluminum block versus iron block. So if you want to turbo these, you can turbo them, but I wouldn't go over like 11 PSI. I have no plans on turboing this. I think these are really fun without turbos, so naturally aspirated. The car has the ZF manual transmission. It's the one that takes the automatic transmission fluid versus gear oil. That won't be a problem, but the upgrade map for this is going to be the intake manifold. I'm going to modify the factory intake so this breathes a little bit better. But otherwise, I want to keep this because I was never really a fan of how these sounded with a can filter. And, you know, going to a pod filter on these things, you're only gaining 4 horsepower at the top end, but you're just gaining a lot more noise. So I'm going to make this quiet but breathe better. So that's pretty much what I'm going to start with. And then after that, I'm going to do the exhaust system. And so this is more of a standard short header design from the factory. And so I'd prefer to keep these because this keeps the torque more towards the mid-range. If you're using a 4-to-1 header, you're pushing the torque all the way up into 6,000 RPM at its peak. If you're using a 4-to-2-to-1 header, then you're keeping it a little lower, probably at 4,800 RPM, but with these factory ones, it keeps it more like 4,000. Now, the difference between the double Vanos and the single Vanos engines are, it's where the torque range is at. They actually have the same horsepower and the same torque. It's just with double Vanos, the torque is lower. So this one, 4,500 RPM. With double Vanos, you're at 4,000 RPM. So it just drops it down a little bit. But not having the exhaust Vanos and all those sensors makes this just that more reliable. So that's why I'm excited for this. But anyway, intake, exhaust, and then I plan on doing the clutch. So back in the day, they had a kit. I'm hoping I can still find it because I have not looked for this kit in 12 years. But it came with like an 11-pound lightweight flywheel and an M5 clutch. And that's pretty much what I want to do to this because that clutch on my Z3 was amazing. It felt buttery soft, but it was a great clutch for the track. The other thing I did on my other Z3 was I also did the diff and put in a diff out of a Z3M. I'm not doing that on this because the gear ratio on this I think is pretty good. It climbs really fast in RPM, so I don't have to worry about that. Do some suspension upgrades on this too. The other thing I'm going to do is upgrade the brakes. So those are going to happen all the way around and bleed the whole system out, change out all the fluids. And then after that, I'm going to do an ECU upgrade. Once the intake and exhaust is done, definitely do an ECU tune and throw it on a dyno and see exactly what this thing is producing. Wheel-wise, it came with these TSWs, and I think these actually look pretty good on here. But what I do want are probably some spacers in the back to push those wheels out, just, you know, ½ inch or so. And then I think I want to drop the suspension down about 1 inch. That's about it. And then interior-wise, let me show you guys the interior of this because it is pretty much immaculate. So my ODB2 port is still uncovered because I had to take this through emissions. But you can see just by looking around here that it is pretty mint, and even the seats are mint. I just have these cheap seat covers on here just to make sure that they stay that way. But really this thing is amazingly immaculate. The top is original. The plastic window, it's getting a little foggy, but it still works. Trunk wise, if you guys want to see what options this came with, not many. So here's the battery toolkit. I was looking around for rattle. That's the reason why this is left open. But you can see there's no rust. There's not really anything in here. It looks pretty damn mint for 54,000 miles. I can't believe this car is 23 years old. 6-disc CD changer. And that's pretty much the trunk. I just got insurance on this thing, so I can actually drive it. Honestly, this thing is just such a joy to drive. Oh. It's quick. You know, I've had several Miatas. One Gen 3 and one Gen 1 and one Gen 1.2. And they're fun to drive, but this thing, for the same price point as a Gen 1 Miata, is way better. I mean, way better. It just kind of blows your doors off. As a matter of fact, the performance of this is pretty much equivalent to a newer Miata. Maybe not the newest one. I think the new Miatas are a little quicker. I think they're like 0 to 60 in 5.5 seconds, whereas this is more like 6 point something. To get this to that point, it's very easy. So that's kind of what I'm excited about. But man, this thing is so much fun to drive. Oh, and it's comfortable. So anyway, those are the plans. So stay tuned. Subscribe for more car stuff on Davin's Random and all kinds of weird random stuff. But anyway, that's what I'm doing with my project cars. Got a lot going on. Anyway, we'll talk to you guys later. See ya.